The automatic doors of Mercy General Hospital in Chicago hissed open at 5:47 a.m., and nobody realized the woman in the damp jacket was about to destroy careers. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, snow melting off her shoulders, carrying nothing but a manila folder that had seen better days. Security Captain Marcus Webb took one look at her worn boots and made his decision in 3 seconds. No badge, no appointment, wrong entrance. He moved to intercept her before she reached the elevator bank, and in that moment, he sealed his own fate. Because the quiet woman he was about to humiliate wasn't lost. She wasn't confused. She was exactly where she needed to be. And what happened in the next hour would expose everything this hospital had been hiding for years. If you want to see how this story ends, how the woman they threw out came back to tear down an empire of arrogance, stick with me until the final word, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The lobby smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. Rebecca Ashford stood just inside the entrance, snowflakes still clinging to her coat collar, and watched the morning shift change with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen 1,000 hospitals wake up. Nurses clustered near the coffee station. Residents stumbled toward elevators, zombie-eyed from overnight rounds. A janitor pushed a yellow mop bucket past the reception desk where 2 administrators whispered behind cupped hands. Nobody looked at her twice. She preferred it that way. "Can I help you?" The voice came from behind, clipped, suspicious. Rebecca turned slowly. The man wore a security uniform that looked tailored, his badge polished to a mirror shine. Name tag read WeBM, Security Director. He had the posture of someone who'd spent time in uniform, but his eyes held something else, something harder. "I have a meeting scheduled," Rebecca said. Her voice was quiet, unremarkable. 7th floor. Webb's gaze traveled from her scuffed boots to the folder in her hands. His mouth tightened. "With who?" "Administration." "Name?" "Rebecca Ashford." He pulled out a tablet, tapped through screens with exaggerated slowness. The lobby continued its morning rhythm around them, phones ringing, intercoms crackling, the distant wail of an ambulance somewhere in the pre-dawn darkness outside. "Not seeing you on any schedule?" Webb looked up. "You sure you got the right building?" Rebecca met his eyes steadily. "I'm sure." "Then somebody made a mistake because you're not cleared to be here." He gestured toward the entrance. "There's a visitor desk across the street. They can help you straighten this out." A nurse passing nearby slowed, glanced their way, then walked faster. "I need to go upstairs," Rebecca said. No pleading in her voice. Just fact. Webb's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile, but felt more like a warning. "Look, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is a secure facility. No badge, no appointment, no access. Simple as that. One phone call clears this up. Then make it from outside." Rebecca stood her ground, and something about her stillness made Webb's jaw tighten. A young security guard, barely 20, name tag reading Rivera, J, appeared at Webb's shoulder, clearly summoned by some silent signal. "Everything okay, Captain?" Rivera's voice cracked slightly. "Escorting a visitor out," Webb said without looking at him. His eyes stayed locked on Rebecca. She seems confused about where she's supposed to be. The lobby had gotten quieter. Not silent, but that particular kind of hush that meant people were paying attention while pretending not to. Rebecca could see phones appearing in peripheral vision, nurses angling themselves to watch without being obvious. She didn't move. "Ma'am, you need to leave now." Webb's hand drifted toward his belt. Not to his weapon, but to his radio. A gesture meant to intimidate. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Rivera shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Captain, maybe we should—" "You got something to say, Rivera?" "No, sir." Rebecca's fingers tightened slightly on her folder, the only outward sign of tension. She'd been in worse situations. Much worse. But those had been in places where the enemy wore a uniform you could recognize, where the threat came from directions you expected. This was different. This was institutional. "I understand you're doing your job," Rebecca said quietly. "But I'm telling you there's been a miscommunication. If you just—" "No miscommunication," Webb cut her off. "You don't belong here. That's not complicated." Near the coffee station, a young man in scrubs, couldn't have been more than 25, pulled out his phone and angled it slightly toward them. Not obvious, just documenting. Rebecca caught the movement but didn't acknowledge it. "Final warning," Webb said. "Walk out on your own, or I call this in as a trespassing incident." The overhead speakers crackled to life. "Trauma team to Bay 3. Trauma team to Bay 3. Inbound critical from highway collision. ETA, 4 minutes." The lobby erupted into controlled chaos. Nurses scattered. Residents sprinted toward the trauma bays. The janitor yanked his mop bucket out of the way as a gurney team rushed past. And in the confusion, Webb grabbed Rebecca's arm. Not gently. "Time to go." Rebecca didn't resist, didn't pull away. She let him steer her toward the doors, and that compliance seemed to unsettle Rivera more than a struggle would have. "Captain?" Rivera tried again, quieter this time. "Her coat's soaked. It's 12 degrees out there. Maybe we could just—" "Since when do you question my calls?" Webb's voice dropped to something dangerous. Rivera went silent. They were almost to the entrance when the doors burst open and 3 people in hospital administration blazers rushed in, nearly colliding with them. The woman in front, 50s, gray hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp behind frameless glasses, stopped dead when she saw Rebecca. Her face went white. "What are you doing?" The question came out strangled. Webb blinked, his grip loosening slightly. "Removing an unauthorized individual, Director Chen. Removing—" Director Sarah Chen looked like she might be sick. "Do you have any idea who that is?" The lobby had gone completely silent now. Every pretense of not watching had evaporated. Even the overhead speakers seemed to hold their breath. Webb's confidence wavered. "She has no badge, no appointment, no—" "She doesn't need a badge!" Chen's voice cracked through the space. She stopped, seemed to catch herself, then turned to Rebecca with something that looked like horror. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were coming in through the main entrance. We were supposed to meet you in the executive parking area." Rebecca's expression didn't change. She'd perfected that particular blankness over years of practice. "Who is she?" Webb demanded, but his voice had lost its edge. Chen ignored him, focusing entirely on Rebecca. "Are you hurt? Did anyone—" "I'm fine." "No, you're not fine. This is—" Chen whirled on Webb. "Do you understand what you've just done?" "Following protocol," Webb said, but he'd released Rebecca's arm and taken a half-step back. "Protocol." Chen's laugh was brittle. "You followed your assumptions, Captain. There's a difference." The young man in scrubs, the one who'd been recording, stepped forward slightly, phone still raised. Chen noticed him, started to say something, then stopped. Smart. Whatever happened next, there was already evidence. Rivera cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I didn't know. We weren't informed." "No, you weren't." Chen's voice had gentled slightly when she looked at the young guard. "This isn't on you, Rivera." But her eyes, when they returned to Webb, could have frozen blood. The overhead speakers crackled again. "Director Chen to administration. Director Chen, priority call on line 1. Chen cursed under her breath. "I need to take this. Ms. Ashford, please. I'll have someone escort you upstairs immediately. We can—" "Actually," Rebecca said, her voice still that same quiet tone that somehow carried through the entire lobby. "I'd like to stay down here a few more minutes." Chen blinked. "I'm sorry? The meeting can wait." Rebecca adjusted her folder. "I'm getting a useful perspective." Something in her tone made Webb go very still. Chen opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly. "Of course. Whatever you need." She turned to Webb. "My office, 20 minutes. Don't be late." She left, her assistant scrambling to follow, and the lobby seemed to exhale. Webb stared at Rebecca with an expression somewhere between confusion and the first creeping edge of fear. "What perspective?" Rebecca didn't answer. She walked back toward the center of the lobby and found an empty chair near the elevator bank. Sat down. Opened her folder and began making notes with a pen that had U.S. Army printed along the side in faded letters. Rivera approached cautiously. "Ma'am, can I get you anything? Coffee or—" "I'm fine, thank you." "Right." He hesitated. "I'm sorry about— I should have said something earlier." Rebecca looked up at him, really looked, saw the guilt written across his face, the way his hands twisted his cap. "You're young," she said. "First year on the job?" 6 months. "Then learn this now. When something feels wrong, it probably is." Her eyes flicked toward Webb, who was pacing near the reception desk with his radio pressed to his ear. Speaking up costs less than staying silent. Rivera swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. The young man in scrubs drifted closer, close enough to introduce himself, but not so close as to intrude. His name tag read Cole E., nursing assistant. Just want you to know, he said quietly, I got everything on video, if you need it. Smart, Rebecca said. Hold on to that. Planning to. Ethan Cole glanced at Webb. This happens a lot here. Not always this obvious, but yeah. Rebecca's pen paused over her notes. What happens a lot? People getting judged before anyone asks questions. He lowered his voice further. Visitors who look wrong get turned away. Patients who don't fit some invisible standard get treated like problems instead of people. We're supposed to report it through official channels, but official channels have been ignoring it. Ethan's silence was confirmation enough. The trauma team rushed past again, this time wheeling a gurney with a victim from the highway collision. Blood had soaked through the sheets. A paramedic ran alongside, squeezing an ambu bag. Organized chaos. Rebecca watched them disappear into the trauma bay, and something in her expression shifted, just for a moment, just enough to show the weight of old memories before she locked them away again. You okay? Ethan asked. Yeah. She shook herself slightly. Been a while since I've seen that from the outside. You medical? Was. Rebecca went back to her notes. Different lifetime. Webb had finished his radio conversation and was staring at her with barely concealed hostility. He started toward them, stopped when his radio crackled again. All security personnel, code yellow, executive conference room. Repeat, code yellow. Code yellow. VIP arrival requiring security sweep. Webb's face twisted with frustration, but he couldn't ignore the call. He jabbed a finger at Rivera. Watch her. Don't let her go anywhere we can't track. Yes, sir. Webb left and the tension in the lobby dropped by half. Rivera sagged against the wall. This job's going to kill me. Or teach you, Rebecca said without looking up. Teach me what? That following orders and doing the right thing aren't always the same. Ethan snorted. Try explaining that to Webb. I don't think Captain Webb is interested in explanations, Rebecca said. Just control. The observation hung in the air like smoke. Around them, the hospital continued its morning routine. Visitors arrived and were processed through proper channels. The ones who looked right, who spoke right, who fit whatever unspoken criteria Webb's team had established. Rebecca watched a middle-aged couple in expensive coats sail through without being questioned. Watched a teenager in a hoodie get stopped and ID'd 3 times before being allowed to the elevator. Patterns. She wrote them all down. 30 minutes passed. Then 45. Director Chen returned, moving fast, her phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call as she reached Rebecca. I'm so sorry for the delay. There's been... She stopped, seemed to reconsider her words. We need to go upstairs. Now. Something's happened. Rebecca stood, gathering her folder. What kind of something? I'll explain on the way. Chen's voice had gone tight with stress. But we need to move quickly. They headed toward the executive elevators, the ones that required a key card. Chen swiped them through and the doors closed, sealing them into brushed steel silence. We have a situation, Chen said as the elevator climbed. I just got word that a military medical transport is inbound. Critical patient. Federal tactical officer injured during a training exercise that went wrong. Rebecca's expression sharpened. ETA. 20 minutes, maybe less. Chen's hands were shaking slightly. They specifically requested our trauma team, but there's a problem. The officer needs specialized care, the kind we're not typically equipped for. Combat trauma protocols, not standard civilian emergency medicine. And you don't have anyone on staff with that training. It wasn't a question. Chen's silence confirmed it. The elevator stopped on the 7th floor. The doors opened onto a conference room packed with people, hospital administration, department heads, a woman in a Navy uniform with more ribbons on her chest than Rebecca could count at a glance. The woman in uniform looked up when they entered, and her eyes went straight to Rebecca. Nurse Ashford. Her voice carried command like gravity. Admiral Catherine Foster, Naval Medical Command. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Rebecca had gone very still. Admiral. I know this isn't standard protocol, but we have a critically injured officer inbound, and your expertise is exactly what we need. Foster gestured to the window, where through the pre-dawn darkness, lights were appearing in the distance. Helicopter lights. Lieutenant Commander James Morrison, 42, blast trauma to chest and abdomen, partial building collapse during tactical training. He needs someone who's worked combat trauma in field conditions. You could have sent him to a military hospital, Rebecca said. Nearest one equipped for this is 2 hours away. He won't make it. Foster's expression was stone. You will. The weight of expectation settled on Rebecca's shoulders like old gear she'd put away years ago. She'd left that world behind, traded the battlefield for quieter work, for assessments and training programs where the stakes were measured in policy changes rather than pulse rates. But some things you never really leave behind. What do you need from me? Rebecca asked. Save his life. Foster checked her watch. You have 15 minutes to scrub in and brief the trauma team on combat protocols. Can you do it? Rebecca looked at the helicopter lights growing larger in the window, thought about the lobby downstairs, about Webb's sneer and the assumptions that had almost gotten her thrown into a snowbank, thought about all the complaints Chen had mentioned, all the patterns she'd been sent here to document. Yes, she said. I can do it. Good. Foster nodded to Chen. Get her whatever she needs, full access, no questions, no delays. Chen was already moving toward the door. This way. Oh. The conference room phone rang, shrill and urgent. Chen grabbed it, listened. Her face went from pale to gray. What? Foster demanded. Security just reported that they removed an unauthorized individual from the building 40 minutes ago. Chen's voice shook. Captain Webb filed an incident report. He documented removing someone who posed a potential security threat and had her escorted off hospital property. The room went silent. Who did he remove? Foster's question was very, very quiet. Chen looked at Rebecca. According to his report, you. The helicopter was 3 minutes out, rotor wash already audible through the windows. Somewhere below, a man was bleeding out, and the person with the best chance of saving him had been thrown out of the building by a security captain who'd made his decision based on a worn coat and tired eyes. Rebecca felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger, not yet, but the kind of clarity that came from watching a situation spiral into disaster and knowing exactly who was responsible. He escorted me to the doors, Rebecca said calmly. I came back in after Director Chen found me. But if she hadn't, Foster's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. If she'd been delayed, if you'd actually left. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The helicopter was landing now, rotors screaming as it settled onto the rooftop pad. Somewhere in that aircraft was a man whose life hung on minutes and decisions, and this hospital had just come within seconds of losing the one person who could save him, all because Marcus Webb had looked at someone and decided she didn't belong. We deal with Webb later, Foster snapped. Right now we have a patient. Ashford, move. Rebecca moved. They ran for the stairs, faster than elevators, and Rebecca's mind shifted into the mode she'd thought was gone forever. Combat calm. Battle focus. The part of her that had worked in tents and bunkers and the backs of moving vehicles while mortars fell and radios screamed and people died if you hesitated. She hit the trauma bay at a dead run, and the team turned to stare at this woman in a damp coat who just appeared from nowhere. Listen up, Rebecca said, and her voice had changed, sharper, harder, carrying the weight of authority earned under fire. You're about to get a patient with combat trauma, blast injuries, probable internal bleeding, possible tension pneumothorax. Civilian protocols won't cut it. You do exactly what I say, exactly when I say it, no questions. Clear? The lead trauma surgeon, Dr. Marcus Reeves, according to his badge, bristled. Who the hell are you? The person who's going to keep your patient alive. Rebecca was already scrubbing in, movements automatic. Admiral Foster can explain credentials later. Right now, you need to know that blast trauma doesn't behave like car crashes. The shockwave does internal damage that won't show on initial scans. You'll think he's stable and then he'll crash, and if you're not ready, you'll lose him. Reeves looked at Foster, who'd appeared in the doorway. Do what she says, Foster ordered. That's not a suggestion. The helicopter had landed. Doors were opening. Paramedics were shouting. Rebecca pulled on gloves, tied her mask, and felt 15 years fall away like shed skin. This was muscle memory. This was the thing she'd been trained for when she was younger and angrier and thought she could save everyone. The gurney crashed through the doors. The patient was bad, worse than the initial report. His chest was crushed, his breathing shallow and rapid, his skin the gray color that meant shock was winning. Blood everywhere. The paramedics had done good work keeping him alive this long, but he was circling the drain fast. Rebecca took one look and started calling orders. Bilateral chest tubes now. Get me ultrasound on his abdomen. I need to see if he's bleeding internally. 2 units O negative hanging, wide open. And somebody get me a thoracotomy tray because if his heart's been bruised, we're going to have to crack his chest right here. The team moved, and Rebecca moved with them, her hands steady as she guided them through procedures most of them had only read about in textbooks. This was war medicine brought to a civilian hospital, brutal and efficient and unforgiving. 20 minutes later, the patient was stable, barely, but stable. Reeves was staring at Rebecca like he'd seen a ghost. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. "Fallujah, Kandahar, a dozen other places you've never heard of." Rebecca stripped off her gloves. "He'll need surgery, but he's got a chance now." Foster stepped into the trauma bay, her expression unreadable. "Well done, Nurse Ashford." "Former Army Sergeant Ashford," Rebecca corrected quietly. "I haven't been nurse in a long time." "No." Foster's eyes were sharp. "You're a battlefield trauma specialist currently contracted as a confidential consultant for military medical readiness programs, which is why you were here this morning, to conduct an assessment." Rebecca met her gaze steadily. "That's right. And how's that assessment going?" Rebecca thought about Webb, about being grabbed and dragged toward the doors, about all the small cruelties she'd witnessed in 45 minutes of observation. "I've seen enough," she said. Foster nodded slowly. "Good, because I want a full report, and I want Captain Webb in a room where he can explain to me why he nearly cost a federal officer his life." They left the trauma bay together, and Rebecca felt the adrenaline starting to fade, leaving behind the familiar exhaustion that came after saving someone. Her hands weren't shaking yet, but they would be soon. The elevator ride back to the 7th floor was silent. When the doors opened, Marcus Webb was waiting in the conference room, standing at attention, his face carefully blank. But his eyes betrayed him. Fear lurked there, barely hidden. He'd figured out what he'd done. Admiral Foster walked past him without a glance and took her seat at the head of the table. Director Chen sat beside her, a tablet already open, evidence compiled. "Captain Webb," Foster said, "tell me about your incident report from this morning." Webb's throat worked. "Ma'am, I documented the removal of an unauthorized individual who attempted to access secure areas without proper credentials." "The individual's name?" "She didn't provide proper identification." "But you filed a report, so you must have gotten her name eventually." Webb's jaw tightened. "Rebecca Ashford." "And did you at any point verify why Ms. Ashford was attempting to access the building?" "She claimed to have a meeting. No such meeting appeared on the schedule." "Did you call administration to confirm?" Silence. "Did you," Foster repeated, her voice dropping to something dangerous, "make a single phone call to verify her story before you physically removed her from this hospital?" "I followed security protocol." "You followed your assumptions, Captain." Foster stood, and the movement had the weight of rank behind it. "And those assumptions nearly killed a man." Webb's face had gone white. "I had no way of knowing. You had every way of knowing. You had a phone, you had a radio, you had multiple options to verify information before you laid hands on a federal consultant." Foster's voice could have cut steel. "Instead, you looked at a woman in a wet coat and decided she was a threat. You want to explain that decision to me?" The silence stretched. Chen spoke up, her voice cold. "Captain Webb has a documented history of aggressive visitor management. We've received 47 complaints in the past 18 months regarding discriminatory treatment at the main entrance. Complaints that were filed with your office, Captain, and subsequently dismissed without investigation." Webb's eyes darted toward her. "Those complaints were what?" Chen cut him off. "Invalid, unfounded, or just inconvenient?" Rivera had appeared in the doorway, still in uniform, looking like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Foster noticed him. "Officer Rivera, come in." Rivera entered reluctantly. "You were present during Ms. Ashford's removal?" "Yes, ma'am." "Tell me what happened, your version." Rivera swallowed hard, glanced at Webb, then seemed to make a decision. "Captain Webb determined Miss Ashford didn't belong based on her appearance," he said quietly. "She was calm, polite, asked for verification. He refused. When she persisted, he grabbed her arm and forced her toward the exit. I tried to question the decision, and he shut me down." "And you didn't push back?" "No, ma'am, I didn't." Rivera's voice was barely above a whisper. "I knew it felt wrong, but I stayed quiet." Foster nodded slowly. "At least you're honest. That counts for something." She turned back to Webb. "Captain, you're suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation. You'll surrender your badge and any access credentials. Security will escort you from the building." Webb's face flushed dark red. You can't. I followed procedure." "You followed prejudice," Foster said flatly, "and you endangered lives doing it. We're done here." Two security officers appeared, ones who clearly outranked Webb, and stood waiting. Webb looked at Rebecca for the first time since she'd entered the room. Really looked at her. "There was no way to know who you were," he said, and it sounded like a plea. Rebecca held his gaze. "You knew enough to judge me," she said quietly. "You just didn't care enough to verify." Webb was escorted out, and the room exhaled. Chen closed her tablet. "I'll begin a full review of security protocols and investigate every complaint that was dismissed. We should have caught this years ago." "Yes, you should have." Foster's voice had lost its edge, but none of its authority. "See that you do better." She turned to Rebecca. "I'm sorry you had to experience that. If you want to withdraw from this assessment—" "No." Rebecca's voice was firm. "I came here to do a job. I'm going to finish it." Foster studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. But I want to know if you need anything at all." "I need access to security footage from the past 6 months," Rebecca said. "Personnel files for the security department, and copies of every complaint that was filed and dismissed." "Done." Rebecca looked out the window, where dawn was finally breaking over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Down in the trauma bay, Lieutenant Commander Morrison was being prepped for surgery, alive because she'd been in the right place despite every effort to remove her. The assessment was just beginning, and Mercy General Hospital was about to learn that some battles weren't fought with scalpels and sutures. Some battles were fought with evidence, accountability, and the quiet determination of a woman who'd saved lives under enemy fire and wasn't about to let institutional arrogance kill someone on her watch. The security footage room was smaller than Rebecca expected and smelled like stale pizza and energy drinks. 3 monitors lined the far wall, each splitting into quadrants that showed different angles of the hospital's public spaces. Director Sarah Chen had given her full access 20 minutes ago, assigned her a junior IT specialist named Marcus Kim, who looked about 19 and terrified of saying the wrong thing. "How far back do you need?" Marcus asked, his fingers already hovering over the keyboard. 6 months, Rebecca said. "Start with main entrance incidents flagged by security." Marcus typed fast. Windows opened and closed on the screens, timestamps blurring past. "There's a lot." "How many?" "Flagged incidents? 237. Rebecca pulled up a chair. "Show me the ones Webb personally handled." The number dropped to 114. "Play them in chronological order," Rebecca said. "Speed them up. I'll tell you when to stop." The first incident showed an elderly black woman with a walker being stopped at the entrance. Webb appeared, checked something on his tablet, then had 2 guards escort her to a side room. Timestamp showed she was held for 40 minutes before someone from patient services came down and cleared her. She'd been visiting her daughter in the ICU. Her name had been misspelled in the system. The second incident was a young Latino man in construction clothes trying to reach the cafeteria during his lunch break. His wife worked in billing. Webb stopped him, demanded ID 3 times, then banned him from the building for aggressive behavior. The footage showed the man's hands raised, backing away, clearly trying to de-escalate. The third was a homeless veteran looking for the free clinic entrance. Webb had him removed by force. Rebecca watched them all. Her face stayed neutral, but her hands had formed fists in her lap. "Jesus," Marcus whispered after the 20th clip. I didn't know it was this bad. Keep playing. They watched for 2 hours. The patterns were clear as broken glass. If you looked middle class and white, Webb waved you through. If you didn't, he found reasons to stop you, delay you, humiliate you. And every single incident had been logged as security protocol properly executed. Rebecca's phone buzzed. Text from Foster. Morrison stable post-op. Surgeon says you saved his life. How's the review going? She typed back. Found the smoking gun. Actually found 114 of them. Marcus paused the footage. You want coffee or something? This is pretty heavy. I'm good. Rebecca rubbed her eyes. Pull up the complaints that were filed against Webb. I want to see what happened to them. Marcus switched screens. Most of them went to Webb's direct supervisor, a guy named Leonard Watts, assistant director of hospital security. He dismissed 90% without investigation. Where's Watts now? Should be in his office, 3rd floor. Rebecca stood. Show me. They took the stairs. The 3rd floor was administrative, carpeted hallways, motivational posters, the quiet hum of people pushing paper instead of saving lives. Watts's office was at the end of the corridor, door half open. Rebecca knocked once and walked in. Leonard Watts looked up from his computer, irritation flashing across his face before he smoothed it into professional courtesy. He was 50s, soft around the middle, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome once and now just looked tired. Can I help you? Rebecca Ashford, I'm conducting a review of security protocols. Watt's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. I wasn't informed. You are now. Rebecca sat down without being invited. I need to talk about Captain Webb. Marcus is an excellent security professional. If there's been some kind of complaint, there have been 114 complaints, Rebecca interrupted, and you dismissed them. Watts leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. I reviewed each case thoroughly. Captain Webb followed established protocol in every instance. Did you watch the footage? I reviewed his incident reports. That's not what I asked. A muscle twitched in Watts' jaw. Ms. Ashford, I don't know what authority you think you have, but I've been running hospital security for 12 years. I know how to evaluate my personnel. Rebecca pulled out her phone and opened the video Ethan had sent her, the one showing Webb grabbing her arm and forcing her toward the doors. She turned the screen toward Watts. Is this protocol? Watts watched for 5 seconds, then looked away. Context matters. The context is that he physically removed a federal consultant without verification. He had no way of knowing who you were. He had a radio, he had a phone, he chose not to use them. Rebecca pocketed her phone. Just like you chose not to investigate complaints that might have prevented this morning's disaster. Watts' face had gone red. I don't appreciate the implication. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Rebecca stood. Admiral Foster will want to speak with you. Make yourself available. She left before he could respond. Marcus was waiting in the hallway, looking impressed and slightly terrified. That was intense. That was restrained, Rebecca said. Where's the staff break room? I need to talk to people who actually work here. The break room on the 4th floor was crowded with nurses on their lunch break. Conversation stopped when Rebecca walked in, and she could feel the weight of curious stares. Word had spread fast. It always did in hospitals. A woman in her 40s with kind eyes and exhausted posture approached. You're the one from this morning, the consultant. That's me. Linda Vasquez, head nurse for MedSurg. She held out her hand. Thank you for what you did, for Morrison, and for not letting Webb get away with it. They shook. Rebecca noticed other nurses drifting closer, forming a loose semicircle. I'm gathering information about security issues, Rebecca said. Anyone want to share experiences? The room erupted. Stories poured out. Patients' families turned away because they didn't look appropriate. Visitors harassed for speaking Spanish in the lobby. A woman denied access to see her dying mother because her hijab made Webb uncomfortable. Each story was worse than the last, and each one had been reported and ignored. Why didn't anyone escalate this higher? Rebecca asked. Linda's laugh was bitter. We tried. Filed complaints with Watts, with HR, with administration. Got told we were being oversensitive. that Webb was maintaining necessary security standards. She made air quotes with her fingers. After a while, people stopped reporting. What's the point? A younger nurse spoke up. Couldn't have been more than 25, name tag reading Torres. A. My cousin came to visit me during my shift last month. Webb stopped him at the entrance, accused him of trespassing, threatened to call the police. My cousin's a lawyer. A lawyer, but he's Mexican, so Webb saw a threat. Did you file a complaint? Rebecca asked. Yeah, got called into HR and told I should be more understanding of security concerns. Angela Torres's voice shook. They basically told me to shut up or risk my job. Rebecca pulled out her notebook. I need names. Everyone who told you to stay quiet. Everyone who dismissed complaints. Everyone who knew this was happening and did nothing. They gave her 17 names. Department heads, HR personnel, administrators who'd actively suppressed evidence. The rot went deeper than Webb. He was just the visible infection. Her phone buzzed again. Foster. Need you in conference room, now. Rebecca excused herself and headed back upstairs. The conference room was packed. Foster, Director Chen, 3 people in suits who looked like lawyers, and a woman Rebecca didn't recognize wearing a police department badge. Sergeant Ashford, Foster said. This is Detective Julia Hernandez, Chicago PD. She's here about the assault. Rebecca stopped. What assault? The one you experienced this morning. Hernandez's voice was professional, neutral. You were physically grabbed and forcibly removed from the premises by Captain Webb. That's battery under Illinois law. I'm not filing charges. The room went silent. Sergeant, Foster said carefully, you don't have to protect... I'm not protecting anyone. Rebecca sat down. But if we turn this into a criminal case, it becomes about me and Webb. One incident, one bad actor. This is bigger than that. Hernandez leaned forward. What are you saying? I'm saying Webb isn't the disease. He's a symptom. Rebecca opened her notebook. I've documented systemic discrimination, witness intimidation, evidence suppression, and administrative cover-up going back at least 6 months. Probably longer. If you want to make a case, make one that matters. Foster was watching her with something that might have been respect. What do you need? More time. More access, and protection for the people willing to talk. Done. Foster looked at Chen. I want every employee who filed a complaint against security in the past year guaranteed immunity from retaliation. Put it in writing. Chen nodded, already typing on her tablet. Hernandez closed her notepad. If you change your mind about pressing charges, I won't. Rebecca met her eyes. But I appreciate the offer. The detective left, and Foster dismissed everyone except Rebecca and Chen. You're sure about this? Foster asked when they were alone. Webb grabbed you hard enough to leave bruises. That's not nothing. Rebecca touched her arm where Webb's fingers had dug in. She'd have marks by tomorrow. I've had worse. I don't doubt it. But you shouldn't have to take worse. Foster's voice had gentled slightly. You could walk away from this, file your report, let someone else handle the cleanup. Could I? Rebecca looked at her steadily. You brought me in because military personnel use this hospital. Because federal officers get treated here. If the culture's this broken, how long before someone dies because they looked wrong or spoke wrong or existed wrong? Foster didn't answer, which was answer enough. I'm seeing this through, Rebecca said, however long it takes. All right, Foster stood. Then let's make sure you have everything you need. The next 3 days blurred into a rhythm of interviews, footage review, and documentation. Rebecca talked to janitors who'd seen things they were afraid to report, talked to patients who'd been mistreated and told themselves it was normal, talked to a physical therapist who'd watched Webb ban a teenager's father from visiting because he had tattoos and looked like gang material. The father was a firefighter. Every story added weight to the case Rebecca was building, and every story made her angrier. On the 4th day, she found something that changed everything. Marcus had pulled security footage from the parking garage, not because Rebecca asked for it, but because he'd gotten curious and started digging on his own. The kid had good instincts. Look at this, he said, pulling up footage from 3 months ago. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. The camera angle covered the executive parking area. A man appeared on screen, disheveled, clearly drunk, stumbling toward the entrance. Security guards intercepted him. Words were exchanged. The man took a swing at one of the guards. Webb appeared from off-screen, grabbed the drunk man, slammed him against a concrete pillar, and held him there while two other guards piled on. The beating lasted 45 seconds. When they were done, the man was unconscious and bleeding from the head. An ambulance arrived. The man was loaded in and taken away. "Jesus Christ," Rebecca whispered. "Please tell me someone reported this." Marcus pulled up another file. It was reported by one of the guards who participated, guy named Daniel Rourke. He filed a complaint saying the force was excessive. What happened to the complaint? Dismissed by Watts. Rourke was transferred to the night shift and written up for insubordination. Marcus's face was pale. The drunk guy? His name was Thomas Brennan, 58 years old, homeless veteran with PTSD. He died 2 days later from a brain hemorrhage. Rebecca felt ice settle in her chest. And Webb? Nothing. Watts ruled it justified use of force to prevent assault on hospital personnel. Where's Rourke now? Still works here. Graveyard shift, parking garage patrol. Rebecca checked her watch, 7 p.m. Get me his schedule. Rourke came on duty at 11. Rebecca waited in the garage, sitting in her rental car, watching the shift change. He appeared right on time, mid-30s, military posture, the kind of careful movements that said he'd been hurt and learned to guard against it. She got out and walked toward him. "Daniel Rourke?" He turned, instantly wary. "Yeah?" "Rebecca Ashford. I'm reviewing security incidents. Can we talk?" His expression shuddered. "I've got nothing to say." "About Thomas Brennan?" Rourke went very still. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You filed a complaint about excessive force. You tried to do the right thing, and they buried you for it. Lady, I don't know who you are or what you think you know, but I like my job. I'd like to keep it." "Your job protecting a system that killed a man?" Rourke's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "No, it's not. Nothing about this is fair." Rebecca took a step closer. "But you can help change it. You witnessed something that matters, something that can't be buried anymore." "They'll fire me." "They can't. Admiral Foster issued immunity protections for anyone cooperating with this investigation. And when the investigation's over, when you leave and we're still here," Rourke's voice cracked slightly, "you don't understand what it's like working under these people. They remember. They punish." "Then help me make sure they can't punish anyone ever again." Rourke stared at her for a long moment. Then he sagged against the concrete wall, all the fight draining out of him. "Brennan didn't deserve what happened to him," he said quietly. "He was drunk, yeah. Confused. Probably having an episode. But he wasn't dangerous. Webb just snapped, started hitting him, and the rest of us, we followed orders. You tried to report it." "Fat lot of good that did." Rourke's laugh was hollow. "Watts called me into his office, told me I was jeopardizing my career over a homeless drunk who probably would have died on the streets anyway. Said if I pushed the issue, he'd make sure I never worked security again." "Did anyone else witness this conversation?" "No, Watts is smart. He never threatens people where it can be recorded." Rebecca pulled out her phone. "Would you be willing to give a formal statement?" Rourke looked at the phone like it was a weapon. "If I do this, I'm done here. You know that, right? Even with protections, even if nothing official happens, they'll make my life hell until I quit." "Probably," Rebecca said honestly. "But Thomas Brennan is dead, and the man who killed him is still working here, still making decisions about who belongs and who doesn't, still hurting people." Rourke closed his eyes. "I think about Brennan every night, dream about that sound his head made hitting the concrete." "Then help me make sure nobody else has to make that sound." He nodded slowly. "Okay. Yeah, I'll do it." They recorded his statement right there in the garage, 20 minutes of testimony that laid out everything Watts had done to cover up Brennan's death. When they finished, Rourke looked lighter somehow, like he'd set down something heavy he'd been carrying too long. "Thank you," Rebecca said. "Don't thank me yet. Wait and see if it matters." Rebecca went straight back to Foster with the recording. The Admiral listened to the whole thing without speaking, her face getting harder with each minute. "This is murder," Foster said when it ended. "Manslaughter at minimum. It's also 3 months old. The medical examiner ruled it accidental. Good luck getting that reopened." "I don't need luck. I need leverage." Foster was already reaching for her phone. and I know exactly where to apply it. The next morning, 2 federal investigators appeared at the hospital. Not local police, not hospital administration, federal agents with badges and authority that superseded everyone. Webb was arrested at his home at 6 a.m. Watts was pulled from his office an hour later. By noon, the hospital was in chaos. Employees whispered in corners. Administrators locked themselves in conference rooms. The news vans appeared outside by 2 p.m., satellite dishes blooming like mechanical flowers. Rebecca watched from the 7th floor window as reporters set up their cameras. This was about to go public in a way that couldn't be controlled or contained. Her phone rang. Unknown number. "Ashford," she answered. "You're destroying innocent lives." The voice was male and angry, trembling with rage. "Webb has a family, kids. You're ruining them over nothing. Who is this? Someone who knows what you're doing. Someone who thinks you should stop before people get hurt." The line went dead. Rebecca stared at her phone. Her hands were steady, but her heart rate had kicked up. She'd been threatened before. Occupational hazard when you exposed corruption. But this felt different, more personal. She forwarded the call information to Foster and went back to work. The interviews continued. More people came forward now that Webb and Watts were in custody. Stories poured out like infection from a lanced wound. A transgender patient denied emergency care because Webb decided they were confused about which bathroom to use. A black surgeon stopped and ID'd 3 times while trying to enter the building where he worked. An elderly Asian woman accused of stealing when she tried to visit her husband in cardiac care. Each story was a brick in the case Rebecca was building. Each one added weight to the evidence that would bury not just Webb and Watts, but the entire system that had protected them. On the 6th day, Director Chen called an emergency staff meeting. The auditorium was packed, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. Rebecca sat in the back, watching. Chen took the stage looking 10 years older than she had a week ago. "I'm sure you've all heard about the arrests, about the investigation. I want to be clear about what this means for Mercy General." Silence. Absolute attention. What happened here was unacceptable. Not just Captain Webb's actions, but our institutional failure to address them. People complained, people spoke up, and we silenced them. Chen's voice cracked slightly. "That ends now. Effective immediately, we're implementing new protocols. Independent oversight of security operations. Mandatory anti-discrimination training for all staff. A confidential reporting system that bypasses internal review. And full cooperation with federal investigators." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I know some of you are angry. Some of you feel betrayed. You should. We failed you. We failed our patients. We failed the community we're supposed to serve." Chen gripped the podium. "But we're going to do better. We have to." After the meeting, people approached Rebecca, shook her hand, thanked her. She accepted it all with the same quiet composure she'd maintained since that first morning when Webb had grabbed her arm. But later, alone in the security footage room with Marcus, she let herself feel it. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "I will be." Rebecca rubbed her face. "How many complaints are left to review?" "Maybe 20. Most of them are minor compared to what we've already found." "Show me anyway." They worked through them methodically. Most were routine, misunderstandings, miscommunications, the kind of friction that happened in any large institution. Nothing that rose to the level of what Webb had done. Then Marcus opened the last file. "Oh," he said quietly. "Oh no." Rebecca looked at the screen. The complaint was from a nurse named Patricia Wells, filed 8 months ago. She'd reported witnessing Watts taking money from a pharmaceutical representative in exchange for influencing which medications the hospital stocked. The complaint had been dismissed as unsubstantiated. Patricia Wells had resigned 2 weeks later. "Find her," Rebecca said. "I need to talk to her." Patricia Wells lived in a small apartment 20 minutes from the hospital. She answered the door in yoga pants and an old medical conference t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. When Rebecca explained who she was, Patricia's face went through several expressions before settling on resignation. "I wondered if someone would eventually come asking," she said. "Come in." The apartment was neat but sparse, the kind of place someone lived in when they were trying to save money or couldn't afford better. Rebecca sat on a couch that had seen better decades. "Tell me about Watts and the pharmaceutical rep," Rebecca said. Patricia took a breath. His name was Eric Sanderson, worked for Helix Pharmaceuticals. I saw him hand Watts an envelope in the parking garage. Cash. At least $5,000 based on the thickness. What did Watts do for it? Push the hospital to adopt Helix's new pain medication over the cheaper generic. It was supposed to be better, but the studies were questionable at best. Patients complained about side effects. Doctors wanted to switch back. Watts made sure the complaints got buried. You reported this to hospital administration, showed them the footage, gave them exact dates and times. They thanked me for my vigilance and told me they'd investigate. Patricia's smile was bitter. 2 days later, I got called into HR. They said I was making serious accusations without evidence. When I pointed out the security footage, they said it had been erased. System malfunction. And then you resigned. They made it clear I had two choices. Resign quietly or get fired for cause. False accusations, they'd call it. Ruin my nursing career. Patricia looked at Rebecca with tired eyes. I've got student loans, bills. I couldn't risk it. Would you be willing to testify about this? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Will it matter? They're good at making things disappear. They can't make federal investigators disappear. And they can't erase what you know. I'm scared, Patricia admitted. Not going to lie about that. That's smart. But being scared and being silent aren't the same thing. Patricia nodded slowly. Okay. Yes, I'll testify. Rebecca recorded her statement, took copies of the documents Patricia had saved, and left with enough evidence to expand the investigation into new territory. This wasn't just about security abuse anymore. This was corruption that touched patient care, that put people at risk for profit. She called Foster from the car. We need to talk, in person. They met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital. Foster listened to Patricia's testimony without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each revelation. How deep does this go? Foster asked when Rebecca finished. I don't know yet, but if Watts was taking kickbacks, odds are he wasn't the only one. You want to keep digging. I want to find everyone who's dirty and burn them out. Rebecca met Foster's eyes. But I need authorization to expand the scope. Foster pulled out her phone and made a call. Spoke quietly for 5 minutes. Hung up. You've got it. Full authority to investigate any and all corruption within Mercy General's administrative structure. I'm also assigning you 2 federal investigators as support staff. I work better alone. Too bad. This is too big for one person, and you've already got a target on your back. Foster's voice was firm. Don't argue. Rebecca didn't argue. The federal investigators arrived the next day, Agent Sarah Monroe and Agent David Park, both with backgrounds in institutional corruption cases. They set up a command center in a conference room the hospital had been forced to provide, and they got to work. The deeper they dug, the worse it got. Watts had been taking money from 3 different pharmaceutical companies. 2 hospital administrators had been falsifying billing records to pocket the difference. The head of purchasing had been steering contracts to his brother-in-law's supply company at inflated prices. Mercy General wasn't just sick, it was rotting from the inside out. And then things got dangerous. Rebecca was leaving the hospital late one night, past midnight, the parking garage mostly empty, when she noticed the car. Dark sedan, engine running, parked in a spot that gave a clear view of the exit. She kept walking, keys between her fingers like she'd been taught in combat training, reached her rental car. The sedan's headlights flicked on. Rebecca got in fast, locked the doors, started the engine. The sedan pulled out, moving to block her exit. She threw the car in reverse, tires squealing as she backed up and swung around. Found another exit route. The sedan followed. Rebecca called Foster, phone on speaker as she navigated through the garage. I've got a tail. Dark blue sedan, no plates visible. They tried to box me in. Where are you? Heading for the street exit. They're still behind me. Do not engage. Get somewhere public and stay there. I'm sending units now. Rebecca hit the street and floored it, running a red light to put distance between her and the sedan. Horns blared. The sedan followed. She took 3 turns fast, weaving through late-night traffic, and pulled into a 24-hour diner parking lot. Ran inside. The sedan cruised past slowly, then disappeared. Police arrived 8 minutes later. Foster showed up 10 minutes after that, her face grim. You're getting too close to something, Foster said. Someone's scared. Good. Rebecca's hands had finally started shaking. Adrenaline crash. Means we're on the right track. It means you're in danger. I've been in danger before. This isn't a battlefield, Sergeant. These people don't follow rules of engagement. Foster sat down across from her in the diner booth. I can pull you out. Hand this off to Monroe and Park. No. Rebecca. No. Rebecca's voice was steel. I started this. I'm finishing it. Foster studied her for a long moment. You're not doing this just for the investigation anymore, are you? This is personal. Rebecca thought about Webb's hand on her arm, about Thomas Brennan dying from a head wound, about Patricia Wells forced to choose between her career and her conscience, about every person who'd been judged, dismissed, hurt because someone in authority decided they didn't matter. Yeah, she said quietly. It's personal. Foster sighed. All right, but you're getting protection. Armed agent with you at all times. Not negotiable. Fine. The armed agent turned out to be a woman named Torres, no relation to the nurse Angela, who looked like she could break someone in half and probably had. She moved into the hotel room next to Rebecca's and took her job seriously. The investigation continued. 3 more administrators were arrested. The pharmaceutical kickback scheme unraveled, exposing 6 years of corruption. Patients who'd been harmed by the fraudulent medication choices started coming forward. And through it all, Rebecca kept working, kept interviewing, kept building the case that would reshape Mercy General from foundation to roof. 2 weeks after the car chase, Monroe found something in the financial records. You need to see this, she said, spreading documents across the conference table. Rebecca looked at the highlighted sections. Wire transfers, shell companies, money moving through channels designed to obscure its origin. What am I looking at? Payoffs, Monroe said. Someone's been paying hospital staff to stay quiet about the security abuse. Hush money, essentially. And the amounts are significant. We're talking $50,000 per person, sometimes more. Who's funding it? That's the interesting part. Monroe pulled up another document. The shell company receiving the money traces back to a law firm, Reese and Whitman. They represent the hospital in malpractice cases. Rebecca felt something click into place. The hospital's been paying its own lawyers to bribe witnesses. Looks that way. Which means someone high up in administration knew about Webb's behavior and actively worked to cover it up. How high? Monroe met her eyes. Chief of staff level, maybe higher. The implications hit like a physical blow. This wasn't just about a rogue security captain anymore. This was institutional conspiracy to obstruct justice, to silence victims, to protect the hospital's reputation at any cost. We need proof, Rebecca said. Evidence that directly ties administration to the bribes. Already on it, Park said from his laptop. I'm going through email records now. If there's a paper trail, I'll find it. He found it 6 hours later. An email from the hospital's chief legal officer to the chief of staff, dated 4 months ago. Another security incident complaint. Recommend standard resolution package, NDA plus settlement. Reese and Whitman standing by. The response? Approved. Keep this quiet. Last thing we need is bad press. Rebecca read it 3 times, making sure she wasn't missing something. But no, it was right there, clear as day. Evidence of a conspiracy that went all the way to the top. We've got them, she said softly. Monroe and Park exchanged glances. Yeah, Monroe agreed. We do. Foster arrived within the hour. Read the emails, made 3 phone calls. Then she turned to Rebecca with an expression that was equal parts satisfaction and fury. We're making arrests tomorrow. Chief of Staff, Chief Legal Officer, and 2 members of the Board of Directors. This is going to be national news. Good, Rebecca said. You should prepare for blowback. They're going to fight this hard. Expensive lawyers, media manipulation, the works. Let them fight. Rebecca's voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. We've got evidence they can't spin away. The arrests happened at dawn. Federal agents moving through the hospital like a surgical strike, taking people from their offices in handcuffs. Rebecca watched from the conference room window as the chief of staff was led out to a waiting car, his face pale with shock. The media feeding frenzy was immediate and vicious. By noon, Mercy General was the lead story on every news network. Corruption, cover-up, a hospital more concerned with protecting its image than its patients. Rebecca gave a statement to the press. Brief, factual, devastating. She didn't dramatize, didn't need to. The facts were damning enough. That night, alone in her hotel room with Torres standing guard outside, Rebecca finally let herself feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. Webb arrested. Watts arrested. The conspiracy exposed. Justice coming for everyone who'd participated in the systematic abuse of power. But she also thought about all the people who'd been hurt before she arrived, all the complaints that had been silenced, all the victims who'd given up because fighting seemed pointless. They deserved better. Everyone deserved better. Her phone rang. Unknown number again. She answered. Ashford. Heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice, distorted, mechanical. You should have stayed out of this. Now you'll have to live with the consequences. The line went dead. Rebecca sat very still, phone in her hand, and wondered what consequences they meant. She'd find out soon enough. Torres was through the door in 3 seconds, weapon drawn, scanning the room like it might explode. What happened? Rebecca set her phone down carefully. Another threat, distorted voice this time, said I'd have to live with consequences. Let me hear it. They hung up. Torres holstered her weapon but didn't relax. We're switching hotels, now. Pack light. They found me at the first hotel. They'll find me at the next one. So we keep moving. Torres was already pulling out her phone. I'm calling this in. Wait. Rebecca stood, her mind working through possibilities. They want me scared, want me to run. That's the whole point. Which is why we're taking the threat seriously and relocating to a secure Ishit. No. Rebecca's voice was firm. We finished this. Tomorrow we're deposing the chief of staff. If I disappear now, his lawyers will use it. Say I'm unstable, that the investigation is compromised. Torres stared at her. You're willing to gamble your life on a deposition? I'm willing to gamble my life on making sure these people can't hurt anyone else. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Torres swore under her breath and made the call anyway. Within an hour, Rebecca's hotel room had 2 additional agents outside the door and a panic button installed next to the bed. She didn't sleep that night. The deposition was scheduled for 9 a.m. in a conference room at the Federal Building downtown. Rebecca arrived early with Torres, passing through metal detectors and security checkpoints that felt excessive until she remembered the threats. Chief of Staff Malcolm Brenner was already there with his legal team, 4 lawyers in suits that cost more than most people made in a month. Brenner himself looked composed, almost bored, like this was a minor inconvenience rather than the destruction of his career. Foster sat across from him, flanked by Monroe and Park. A court stenographer set up her equipment in the corner. Rebecca took her seat at the table. Brenner's lead attorney, a woman named Victoria Strand, who had a reputation for destroying witnesses, smiled coldly. Shall we begin? The first hour was procedural, establishing timeline, confirming Brenner's role, walking through organizational structure. Brenner answered everything with practiced ease, never volunteering information, never showing strain. Then Monroe slid the email across the table. Do you recognize this correspondence, Mr. Brenner? Brenner glanced at it. I receive hundreds of emails daily. This one's from your chief legal officer recommending a standard resolution package for a security incident complaint. Your response was approved. Do you recall this exchange? Not specifically. Let me refresh your memory. The complaint in question involved Captain Marcus Webb forcibly removing an elderly patient's family member from the hospital. The resolution package you approved was a $50,000 settlement with an NDA. Does that ring any bells? Strand cut in smoothly. My client isn't required to recall every administrative decision. He's required to recall authorizing hush money to cover up civil rights violations, Foster said. That's conspiracy to obstruct justice. That's a selective interpretation of routine settlement procedures. Monroe pulled out another document. Here's another email, and another, and another. 12 separate incidents over 18 months where complaints against security personnel were resolved with cash settlements and NDAs, all approved by your client. Brenner's composure finally cracked slightly. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Those were legal settlements to avoid costly litigation, he said. Standard hospital risk management. Was Thomas Brennan's death standard risk management? Rebecca asked quietly. The room went silent. Strand's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means your client authorized payments to cover up a pattern of abuse that culminated in a man being beaten to death in the parking garage. Rebecca kept her voice level, factual, and rather than address the problem, he threw money at it and hoped it would disappear. You have no evidence linking Mr. Brenner to... We have financial records showing payments from hospital discretionary funds to Reese and Whitman, your firm, specifically earmarked for incident resolution. We have testimony from witnesses who were offered those settlements, and we have this. Park opened his laptop and turned it so everyone could see. Security footage from Mr. Brenner's office, 3 weeks after Thomas Brennan died. Watch carefully. The footage showed Brenner meeting with Watts. No audio, but body language told the story. Watts gesturing urgently. Brenner listening, then making a phone call. Watts relaxing. That's the day Watts dismissed Daniel Rourke's excessive force complaint, Park said. The complaint about Brennan's death. And 2 hours after this meeting, Rourke was transferred to the graveyard shift and written up for insubordination. Brenner's face had gone pale. Strand stood abruptly. We're done here. My client won't be answering any more questions without... Your client is going to prison, Foster said flatly. The only question is for how long. So sit down, Ms. Strand, and let's talk about cooperation. They broke for lunch. Rebecca stepped outside into cold air that felt like salvation after 3 hours in that room. Torres followed, watchful. You nailed him, Torres said. Maybe. Rebecca rubbed her temples. Strand's good. She'll find angles. Not with that evidence. He's finished. Rebecca wanted to believe that. But she'd seen guilty people walk before. Seen expensive lawyers turn slam-dunk cases into reasonable doubt. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus Kim. Need to talk. Found something in old footage. Important. She called him back. What'd you find? Not over the phone. Can you come to the hospital? I'm in the middle of a deposition. This can't wait. Marcus's voice was tight with stress. Please. It's about the threats. Rebecca exchanged glances with Torres, who was already shaking her head. We'll be there in 30 minutes, Rebecca said. Torres drove fast, running yellow lights, her jaw set. This is a bad idea. Noted. If this is a setup, then you'll shoot someone. Rebecca checked her phone again. Nothing new from Marcus. He sounded scared. Everyone's scared. Doesn't mean we walk into traps. They pulled into the hospital parking garage. Different entrance this time, not the executive area. Torres parked near the exit, positioning for a quick escape if needed. Marcus was waiting near the security office, pacing, looking over his shoulder every few seconds. Show me, Rebecca said without preamble. He led them inside. The monitors were dark, except for one, showing paused footage from the parking garage. Timestamp read 3 days ago, the night Rebecca had been followed. I've been reviewing all garage footage since the car chase, Marcus said, trying to identify the sedan. Found this instead. He pressed play. The footage showed the garage at night. A figure appeared, wearing a hooded jacket, face obscured. They moved directly to Rebecca's rental car and attached something to the undercarriage. Small device, barely visible in the grainy footage. Then the figure disappeared. Rebecca felt ice slide down her spine. When was this? 2 hours before you were chased. The device was a tracker. They knew where you'd be because they'd been following you electronically. Is it still there? Torres demanded. I checked. Gone now. But here's the thing. Marcus fast-forwarded to a different camera angle, zoomed in on the figure's hand. A tattoo was visible on the wrist. Distinctive. Looked like military insignia. I ran this image through facial recognition. Got nothing, but that tattoo... He pulled up another file. Social media profile for someone named Derek Walsh. Construction worker, former Marine, and in one photo from 2 years ago, the same tattoo clearly visible. Who is he? Rebecca asked. No idea. But look at his employment history. Marcus clicked through screens. He worked hospital security, right here at Mercy General. Quit 8 months ago, right after Patricia Wells filed her complaint about Watts. The pieces started falling into place. He's connected to this, Rebecca said, to the cover-up. Gets better, or worse, depending on perspective. Marcus pulled up bank records. Walsh received a payment of $20,000 3 days before he planted that tracker. Wire transfer from a shell company registered in Delaware. Same shell company that funded the hush money payments. Torres was already on her phone, calling it in. We need units to Walsh's last known address. Now. Already tried that, Marcus said. He hasn't been at his apartment in a week. Landlord says he cleared out in a hurry. Rebecca stared at the frozen image of Walsh attaching the tracker to her car. Someone had hired him to watch her, to follow her. To do what, exactly? The threatening phone calls suddenly felt more concrete. Less like intimidation, more like warning. We need to leave, Torres said, ending her call. If Walsh is active and motivated, this building isn't secure. They headed for the exit. The garage was quiet, most staff still at lunch. Their footsteps echoed off concrete. Torres's phone rang. She answered, listened, her expression darkening. Understood, we're mobile now. She hung up. Federal agents just raided Walsh's apartment, found a rifle with a scope, ammunition, and surveillance photos of you. Lots of photos. Rebecca's stomach twisted. He was planning to kill me. Looks that way. Photos show you leaving your hotel, entering the federal building, walking to your car. He's been tracking your movements for days. They reached Torres's vehicle. She did a quick check underneath. No trackers, no devices. They got in fast. Where's Walsh now? Rebecca asked. Unknown, but every law enforcement agency in the state is looking for him. They drove back to the federal building in silence. Rebecca's mind was racing. Walsh had worked hospital security, had been there during the cover-up, had quit right when things started getting exposed. Someone had activated him, paid him, sent him after her. The question was who? Brenner's deposition resumed at 2 p.m. He looked worse now, sweat visible on his forehead despite the cool temperature. Strand had regrouped during lunch. My client is willing to discuss a cooperation agreement in exchange for reduced charges. Keep talking, Foster said. Mr. Brenner will provide testimony regarding other individuals involved in the settlement scheme. Names, dates, specific incidents, full disclosure. In exchange for what? Immunity from prosecution for manslaughter charges related to Thomas Brennan's death. Rebecca felt rage flash hot in her chest. No. Everyone looked at her. He authorized the cover-up that let a killer stay on the streets, Rebecca said, her voice shaking with controlled fury. He's complicit in Brennan's death. He doesn't get to walk away from that. Strand's smile was sharp. Ms. Ashford, I understand you're emotionally invested in this case, but don't. Rebecca stood, leaning forward on the table. Don't patronize me. I watched security footage of Thomas Brennan getting beaten to death. I interviewed the guard who tried to report it and got punished for doing the right thing. I talked to Brennan's daughter, who came to the hospital looking for answers and got stonewalled by the same administration your client leads. So no, this isn't emotional investment. This is accountability. Foster raised a hand. Sergeant Ashford makes a valid point, but we need leverage to reach the people above Brenner, the board members, the investors who knew about the corruption and profited from it. They're already in custody, Rebecca said. They're lawyered up and saying nothing. Brenner can give us the evidence to convict them. Foster looked at her steadily. Sometimes justice means accepting a deal you hate to get to bigger targets. Rebecca wanted to argue, wanted to flip the table and tell them all that deals were how guilty people escaped consequences. But she'd been a soldier long enough to know that sometimes you had to accept tactical losses to win strategic victories. What's the deal? She asked through clenched teeth. Reduced charge to criminal negligence? 5-year suspended sentence, permanent ban from healthcare administration, full cooperation with ongoing investigations. Strand's voice was crisp, professional. Mr. Brenner will provide detailed testimony about who knew what and when. Names, communications, financial arrangements, everything. Foster looked at Rebecca. Your call. It shouldn't have been her call. This was a federal investigation with prosecutors and agents who made these decisions professionally. But Foster was giving her the choice anyway, and Rebecca understood why. This had started with her being judged and dismissed by people who thought she didn't matter. It had grown into something bigger, but at its core, it was still about whether the powerful would face consequences for abusing the powerless. He testifies first, Rebecca said. Full disclosure. Then we talk about deals. Strand started to object, but Brenner cut her off. Agreed. His lawyer looked shocked. Malcolm, I strongly advise, I'm done. Brenner's voice was hollow. I'm tired of covering for people worse than me. Let's get this over with. He talked for 4 hours, named 15 people involved in the settlement scheme, detailed how the hospital board had known about Webb's behavior for years and chose profit over ethics, explained how pharmaceutical kickbacks worked, how contracts were steered, how complaints were buried. By the time he finished, Rebecca had filled an entire notebook with names and connections. Monroe leaned back in her chair. That's enough for 20 more arrests. Get warrants, Foster said. Move fast before they can destroy evidence. The arrests started that evening. Board members pulled from charity galas. Administrators taken from their homes. The head of purchasing grabbed at the airport trying to flee to Mexico. The media coverage intensified. National news picked up the story. Mercy General became shorthand for institutional corruption, and through it all, Derek Walsh remained missing. Rebecca returned to her hotel, a new one, 4th location in as many days, with 3 agents instead of 1. The room was on an upper floor away from windows, with security cameras covering every approach. She sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. In 3 weeks, she'd gone from a consultant doing a routine assessment to the center of a federal investigation that was dismantling an entire hospital's leadership. People had threatened her, tried to follow her, planned to kill her, and she was still here. Her phone rang. Foster. We found Walsh, Foster said without preamble. He's dead. Rebecca's breath caught. What? Apparent suicide. Gunshot to the head in a motel room 20 miles outside the city. Left a note. What did it say? That he was sorry. That he never meant for it to go this far. That someone promised him it would just be surveillance, nothing violent. Foster paused. He also named who hired him. Rebecca waited. Victoria Strand. The world tilted sideways. Brenner's attorney? Rebecca's voice sounded distant to her own ears. Former attorney? She withdrew from his case an hour ago, citing conflict of interest. We're trying to locate her now, but she's in the wind. Rebecca tried to make sense of it. Strand had been defending Brenner while simultaneously trying to kill the investigation's lead witness. She'd sat across the table from Rebecca for hours, smiling that cold smile, all while knowing she'd hired someone to eliminate her. Why? Rebecca asked. Money. Strand's firm has represented Mercy General for 15 years, millions in legal fees. If the hospital goes down, so does their cash cow. She was protecting the investment by murdering a federal consultant. Desperate people do desperate things. Foster's voice was grim. But Walsh's suicide note gives us everything we need. Strand's text to Walsh, payment records, instructions. She's done. If you can find her. We will. U.S. Marshals are on it. They hung up. Rebecca sat in the dark hotel room and thought about Walsh putting a gun to his head. He'd been a Marine, like her. Had probably joined for the same reasons. Service, purpose, belonging. Somewhere along the way, he'd gotten lost, compromised. And someone like Strand had exploited that. Now he was dead, and she was gone, and the investigation ground forward. The next morning brought news that Strand had been arrested trying to board a private plane to the Cayman Islands. She refused to talk without immunity, which she wasn't getting. Federal prosecutors filed charges, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation. Brenner's cooperation agreement fell apart when it came out his own lawyer had tried to kill a witness. He ended up charged with everything originally threatened, his credibility destroyed. The dominoes kept falling. Rebecca spent the following week in depositions and interviews. More hospital staff came forward. More evidence surfaced. The pharmaceutical companies whose drugs had been pushed through kickbacks faced their own investigations. And then, 3 weeks after Walsh's death, something unexpected happened. Rebecca was reviewing files in the federal building conference room when Agent Park burst in, laptop open, face flushed with excitement. "You need to see this," he said, setting the laptop down. The screen showed an email chain, recent, less than an hour old. Communications between board members discussing the investigation, discussing Rebecca specifically. "She won't stop. We need to give her something that ends this." "Like what?" "The truth. The real truth. Before she finds it herself." Rebecca read through the emails, her confusion growing. "What is this? I hacked their private server. They think it's secure, but they're idiots." Park was practically vibrating with energy. Keep reading. She scrolled down, found an email from someone named Gregory Hale, hospital board chairman, the one person who hadn't been arrested yet because they couldn't find evidence directly tying him to anything. The email was addressed to the remaining board members. The consultant, Ashford, is former military, combat medic. She's not going to accept half measures. If we want to survive this, we need to offer something she can't refuse. Full transparency, complete admission of guilt, names, dates, everything. We cooperate completely, accept responsibility, and beg for mercy. It's the only play we have left. Rebecca stared at the screen. They're going to confess, she said slowly. Everything. Better than that. Park pulled up another file. Hale's already drafted a full disclosure document. 40 pages detailing every corrupt act, every cover-up, every payment. He's planning to deliver it to federal prosecutors tomorrow morning. Why would he do that? Because he's smart enough to know you've already won. The investigation has so much momentum that even if they destroy evidence, you'll find enough to convict them. Their only hope is cooperation. Park grinned. You scared them into capitulation. Rebecca read through Hale's disclosure document. It was comprehensive, damning, and exactly what they needed to close every remaining gap in the case. Get Foster, she said. She needs to see this. Foster arrived within 30 minutes, read the documents, made 3 phone calls. Then she turned to Rebecca with something that might have been pride. You did it, Foster said simply. You broke them. We broke them, Rebecca corrected. This was a team effort. Don't be modest. You're the one who refused to walk away. The one who kept pushing when it would have been easier to quit. Foster gestured to the laptop. They're surrendering because they're terrified of you, of what you represent. What do I represent? Someone who can't be bought, intimidated, or silenced. Someone who cares more about justice than career advancement or personal safety. Foster's expression softened slightly. That's rare, especially in people who've seen as much darkness as you have. Rebecca didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The formal surrender happened the next day. Gregory Hale walked into the federal building flanked by lawyers and handed over the disclosure document personally. He looked 20 years older than his file photo, his suit hanging off him like he'd lost weight from stress. I'm cooperating fully, he told the assembled prosecutors. No deals, no conditions. I just want this to end. They processed him through anyway. Fingerprints, booking photo, formal charges. Then they put him in a conference room and let him talk. He talked for 6 hours straight, named everyone involved in the corruption, detailed how it had started small, minor kickbacks, favorable contracts, and metastasized into systematic abuse. Explained how Webb had been protected because he was effective at keeping undesirable people out, which made the hospital look more prestigious and attracted wealthier patients. We knew he was brutal, Hale said, his voice hollow. We knew people complained, but the complaints came from people who didn't matter to our bottom line, so we ignored them. People like Thomas Brennan, Rebecca asked quietly. Hale flinched. Yes. Did you know about his death? I knew Webb had beaten someone. Watts told me it was self-defense. I believed him because it was easier than investigating. Hale looked at her directly for the first time. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I understand what we did, what I did, and I'll spend whatever time I have left trying to make it right. Rebecca studied him, saw genuine remorse there mixed with exhaustion and fear. It didn't excuse anything, but it was more than Webb or Watts or Brenner had offered. How do you make it right? She asked. I don't know if I can, but I'll testify against everyone, help recover the money we stole, work with victims who want restitution. Whatever it takes. Foster leaned forward. Who else knew about the plan to kill Sergeant Ashford? Hale's face went gray. Nobody. That was all Strand. She acted independently, trying to protect the firm's interests. When we found out what she'd done, we knew it was over. That's when I started drafting the disclosure. You didn't report her. We should have. That's another failure on my part. Hale's hands were shaking. I was a coward. I am a coward, but I'm trying to do better now. The deposition continued. Monroe and Park cross-referenced everything Hale said against evidence they'd already gathered. It all checked out. He wasn't lying or minimizing. He was destroying himself and everyone connected to him with brutal honesty. By the time they finished, the case against Mercy General's leadership was airtight. Rebecca left the federal building as the sun set, painting Chicago's skyline in shades of orange and red. Torres walked beside her, ever vigilant, but the tension had eased slightly. With Walsh dead and Strand in custody, the immediate physical threats had diminished. "What now?" Torres asked. "Now we wait for trials," Rebecca said. "Make sure the evidence holds up, testify when needed." And after that, Rebecca hadn't thought that far ahead. This investigation had consumed her life for nearly a month. She'd barely slept, barely eaten, barely thought about anything except evidence and justice and making sure guilty people faced consequences. "I don't know," she admitted. Her phone buzzed. Text from Ethan Cole, the nursing assistant who'd recorded the original incident. "They're having a staff meeting tomorrow, talking about culture changes. Thought you might want to know." Rebecca showed Torres the text. "You going?" Torres asked. "Should I?" "That's not a security question. That's a personal one." Rebecca thought about it. She'd torn this hospital apart, exposed its corruption, destroyed careers and reputations. The people who remained, the nurses and doctors and support staff who'd had nothing to do with the abuse, they were trying to rebuild something better. Maybe she owed it to them to see that process start. "Yeah," she said, "I'm going." The staff meeting was held in the main auditorium the next morning. Rebecca arrived early, slipping in through a side entrance to avoid attention. The room filled quickly, hundreds of employees, all looking exhausted and shell-shocked. Director Sarah Morrison, recently promoted from assistant director after the previous leadership was arrested, took the stage. She looked nervous but determined. "I know the past month has been hell," Morrison began. "We've watched our institution get torn apart, watched people we trusted get led away in handcuffs, watched our reputation get destroyed on national news." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "But here's the thing," Morrison continued. "We deserved it. Not the nurses and doctors working overnight shifts to save lives. Not the custodial staff keeping this place running, but the institution, the culture that allowed abuse to flourish, that absolutely deserved to be torn down." The room had gone silent. "So now we rebuild. And we do it right this time." Morrison pulled up a slide showing new protocols. Mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all staff. Independent oversight committee with community representation. Anonymous reporting system that bypasses internal review. Zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind. She clicked to the next slide. "We're also establishing the Thomas Brennan Memorial Fund. Money recovered from the corruption cases will go toward providing free healthcare to unhoused veterans. It won't bring him back, but it'll honor his memory by helping people like him." Rebecca felt her throat tighten. Morrison continued talking about transparency, accountability, and culture change. And then she said something that made Rebecca's breath catch. None of this would have happened without someone having the courage to stand up when it would have been easier to walk away. Someone who refused to accept that abuse was normal or acceptable. Someone who fought for people she'd never met because it was the right thing to do. Morrison's eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Rebecca sitting in the back. "Sergeant Rebecca Ashford is here today. I'd like her to come up and say a few words." Every head in the auditorium turned. Rebecca froze. She hadn't prepared a speech, hadn't expected to be called out. But Morrison was gesturing to the stage, and people were starting to applaud, and suddenly she was walking down the aisle while hundreds of people watched. She reached the stage. Morrison handed her the microphone. The applause died down, leaving expectant silence. Rebecca looked out at all those faces, saw hope there, and fear, and the desperate desire to believe that things could actually change. "I'm not good at speeches," she said, and her voice echoed through the sound system. "So I'll keep this short." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "A month ago, I walked into this hospital's lobby, and I was judged before anyone knew my name, treated like a threat because I didn't look the way someone in authority thought I should look. And that treatment wasn't unique to me. It happened to hundreds of people, patients, visitors, staff members. Anyone who didn't fit some arbitrary standard of acceptability." The room was absolutely still. The people who created that culture are facing justice now. But culture doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's created and sustained by everyone who participates in it. Everyone who sees something wrong and stays silent. Everyone who follows orders they know are unjust because speaking up feels dangerous. Rebecca's eyes found Rivera standing near the wall. The young guard who'd tried to question Webb and been shut down. It takes courage to speak up, real courage, the kind that risks your job, your reputation, your safety. I know because I've had to find that courage myself, and it's never easy. She paused. But silence has a cost too, and that cost is measured in people hurt, trust destroyed, and institutions that rot from the inside out. She could see people nodding, some wiping their eyes. So if you take one thing from this disaster, let it be this. Your voice matters. Your conscience matters. And when you see something wrong, when you feel that quiet certainty that this isn't right, this isn't acceptable, trust that instinct. Because the only way institutions change is when the people within them refuse to accept the status quo. Rebecca handed the microphone back to Morrison. The applause that followed was different this time, louder, more genuine, people standing because they wanted to, not because it was expected. She walked off the stage and straight out of the auditorium, needing air, needing space. Torres was waiting in the hallway. "That was good," Torres said. "That was terrifying." "Same thing sometimes." Rebecca's phone rang. "Foster." "Turn on the news," Foster said without greeting. "Channel 7. Rebecca found a TV in a nearby waiting room, switched it on. The news anchor was mid-sentence. "Shocking developments in the Mercy General corruption case. Sources tell us that former hospital board chairman Gregory Hale was found dead in his cell this morning. Officials are calling it an apparent suicide, but questions are already being raised about how Hale obtained the materials to hang himself while under 24-hour suicide watch." Rebecca's blood went cold. "They killed him," she said into the phone. "We don't know that," Foster replied, but she didn't sound convinced. He was cooperating, testifying against people more powerful than him, and now he's conveniently dead before he could complete that testimony. "The investigation into his death is ongoing." "Don't!" Rebecca's voice was sharp. "Don't give me official statements. Someone wanted Hale silenced, and they made it happen." Foster was silent for a long moment. "If that's true, it means there are players we haven't identified yet, people high enough to reach into federal custody. So what do we do? We keep digging, and we watch our backs." The call ended. Rebecca stared at the TV where footage of Hale's last public appearance played on loop. He'd looked broken, but honest, resigned to facing consequences. Now he was dead, and the deepest secrets he'd been about to reveal had died with him. Rebecca felt rage and frustration warring in her chest. They'd been so close to complete justice, and now there were gaps, missing pieces. Questions that Hale's death had left unanswered. "We need to go," Torres said urgently. "If Hale was murdered, you could be next on the list." But Rebecca was already moving, her mind racing. Hale had drafted a disclosure document, 40 pages of evidence. But what if there was more? What if he'd held back the most damaging information for a later reveal? She called Marcus Kim. "I need access to Hale's office at the hospital," she said when he answered. "Everything. Computer files, paper records, personal effects. The feds already went through it. Then they missed something. Meet me there in 10 minutes. She ran for the exit, Torres cursing as she tried to keep up. Hale's office had been stripped. Desk empty, filing cabinets cleaned out, even the computer tower removed by federal agents. All that remained was furniture and the faint smell of expensive cologne. Marcus stood in the doorway looking apologetic. "Told you they already cleared it." Rebecca walked the perimeter anyway, running her hands along walls, checking behind picture frames. Torres watched from the hallway, radio crackling with security updates. "What are you looking for?" Marcus asked. "Something the feds wouldn't think to take." Rebecca crouched near the desk, examining the underside. Nothing. Hale knew he was going down. Smart people in that position make insurance. Like what? Backup evidence, proof that could protect him if the deal went bad. She stood, frustrated. He had to hide it somewhere. Marcus pulled out his phone. "Let me check something." He typed rapidly, pulling up building schematics. Hale had 2 offices, this one for official business. But there's another space registered to him. 5th floor, east wing. Small room, listed as private study. Rebecca was already moving. The 5th floor was quieter, mostly administrative storage. The private study was locked, but Marcus had override access. The door swung open to reveal a space half the size of Hale's main office. 1 desk, 1 chair, shelves lined with medical journals and framed certificates. and a safe built into the wall behind a painting. Can you open it? Rebecca asked. Marcus examined the digital lock. Not without the code. These things have anti-tamper protocols. 3 wrong attempts and it locks down permanently. Rebecca studied the safe. Standard 6-digit code. Millions of possible combinations. Hale was methodical, she said, thinking aloud. He'd use something memorable but not obvious. Not his birthday or social security number, too easy for investigators to guess. So what then? Rebecca looked around the room. The certificates on the wall showed Hale's medical degree, board certifications, various awards. One frame held a photo. Hale younger, standing with an older couple. Parents, probably. The photo was dated June 14th, 1987. Rebecca tried the date. 061487. The safe beeped red. Wrong code. 2 tries left, Marcus warned. Rebecca examined the photo more closely. There was writing on the back visible through the glass. Barely legible, but she could make out numbers. 082219. She tried it. The safe clicked open. Inside were 3 items: a flash drive, a burner phone, and a handwritten letter in an envelope marked insurance. Rebecca pulled on gloves before touching anything, opened the letter carefully. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. If you're reading this, I'm either in custody or dead. Either way, the people I'm about to name can't be allowed to escape justice. The corruption at Mercy General didn't start with me. It started 20 years ago with a group of investors who saw healthcare as profit opportunity, nothing more. They bought controlling interest in this hospital and systematically stripped it of everything that made it serve the community. What you've uncovered so far is surface level. The real rot goes deeper. The flash drive contains financial records linking hospital funds to offshore accounts, controlled by a shell corporation called Helix Capital Partners. The partners are Senator Richard Hartwell, Illinois, currently running for re-election; Margaret Price, CEO, Midwest Health Consolidated; Dr. James Kellerman, former Surgeon General, Victoria Strand. Yes, my attorney. She was an investor long before she was my lawyer. As Sabtimus. They're the ones who mandated the policies that led to Thomas Brennan's death. They're the ones who demanded we maximize revenue by any means necessary. Webb, Watts, Brenner, me. We were just executing their vision. The burner phone contains encrypted communications between us. Codes are stored on the flash drive under keys. Use them carefully. These people have reach beyond anything you've dealt with so far. I'm sorry for my part in this. I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to come forward sooner. But I'm trying to make it right now, even if it costs me everything. Gregory Hale. Rebecca read the letter twice, her hands shaking slightly. This wasn't just hospital corruption anymore. This was institutional conspiracy reaching into state and federal government. We need to call Foster, Marcus said, reading over her shoulder. No. Rebecca pocketed the flash drive and phone. Not yet. What? Why? Because if a senator and a former surgeon general are involved, they have people inside federal agencies. We call this in prematurely, and evidence disappears, witnesses recant, cases fall apart. Torres appeared in the doorway. What did you find? Rebecca showed her the letter. Torres read it, her expression darkening. This is way above our pay grade, Torres said. We need to elevate this to... To who? Rebecca cut her off. Foster reports to the Navy, which ultimately answers to the Department of Defense. Kellerman used to run the Surgeon General's office. He still has connections throughout federal health agencies. Hartwell sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee. They have eyes and ears everywhere. So what's your plan? Go rogue? My plan is to verify this information independently before we hand it to anyone who might bury it. Rebecca held up the flash drive. We copy this data, analyze it ourselves, and only share it when we're certain it can't be suppressed. Torres and Marcus exchanged glances. That's not protocol, Torres said carefully. Protocol gets whistleblowers killed. Rebecca's voice was hard. Hale followed protocol by surrendering to federal authorities. Now he's dead. I'm not making the same mistake. Silence stretched between them. Okay, Marcus said finally. I'm in. But we need somewhere secure to work. Somewhere off the grid. I know a place, Torres said, pulling out her phone. Give me an hour. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a neighborhood that asked no questions. Torres cleared it for surveillance devices while Rebecca and Marcus set up laptops on the kitchen table. The flash drive was encrypted, but Hale had left detailed instructions. Marcus worked through the security layers methodically, and after 40 minutes, files began appearing on screen. Financial records, thousands of pages. Rebecca started with the communications log. Encrypted messages between Hale and the four investors, spanning 2 decades. The early messages were mundane, budget discussions, policy recommendations. But around 10 years ago, the tone shifted. From Hartwell, revenue is down 8% this quarter. This is unacceptable. Cut costs wherever necessary. From Hale, we've already reduced staffing below safe minimums. From Hartwell, then reduce it more. Shareholders expect returns. Later messages were worse. From Price, the incident with the homeless patient could expose us to liability. Make it disappear. From Hale, how do you suggest? From Strand, I'll handle it. Standard settlement package plus NDA. But this is the 3rd one this year. We need permanent solutions. From Kellerman, permanent solutions mean eliminating the source. Tighten security protocols. Make the hospital less accessible to undesirable populations. Rebecca felt sick reading them. These people had systematically engineered an environment where abuse was inevitable, then covered it up when it happened. Look at this, Marcus said, pulling up a different file. Bank records showing money flowing from Helix Capital Partners into offshore accounts, then back into the U.S. through shell companies that made campaign contributions to Hartwell's Senate races. Money laundering to fund political campaigns. Another file showed Kellerman accepting consulting fees from pharmaceutical companies in exchange for recommending their drugs while he was Surgeon General. The same drugs later pushed through Watts's kickback scheme at Mercy General. Price had used her position as CEO of a hospital management company to steer contracts to vendors who paid her through a fake LLC. And Strand had been the fixer for all of it, using her law firm to create the legal structures that hid the money trail. This is RICO, Torres said, looking over the documents. Racketeering, conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud. This puts all of them away for decades. If we can get it to prosecutors who aren't compromised, Rebecca said. I know someone, Torres said. Federal prosecutor, completely straight arrow, works public corruption cases. Mitchell Reeves? We served together in Afghanistan. I'd trust him with my life. Can you reach him securely? Yeah, he's paranoid about surveillance. Uses encrypted channels for everything. Torres made the call from a burner phone, speaking in careful code. 20 minutes later, she hung up. He wants to meet. Midnight, Lincoln Park, near the bench by the pond. Come alone. Not happening, Rebecca said. We go together or not at all. He won't talk if I bring people he doesn't know. Then introduce us. Rebecca's tone left no room for argument. These documents put targets on all our backs. We stay together. Midnight found them walking through Lincoln Park, breath misting in cold air. The pond was dark, reflecting sparse streetlights. A figure sat on the designated bench, tall, black, early 40s, wearing a running jacket despite the temperature. Mitchell Reeves stood as they approached. He embraced Torres briefly, then studied Rebecca with sharp eyes. You're Ashford, the Mercy General consultant. That's me. Torres says you have something for me. Rebecca handed him a tablet loaded with copies of Hale's files. Reeves read through them, his expression growing more intense with each page. Where did you get this? He asked finally. Gregory Hale hid it before he died. Insurance policy. Died or was murdered. The official story is suicide. You tell me what you believe. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Hartwell's running for re-election in 3 weeks. He's up by 12 points. Price just got nominated for a healthcare advisory position in the administration. Kellerman's being considered for a board position at the CDC. These people are ascending, not descending. That changes with this evidence, Rebecca said. Maybe. Or maybe it gets buried by people protecting their interests. Reeves handed back the tablet. You know what happens when you go after a sitting senator? The full weight of political machinery comes down on you. Investigators get reassigned. Witnesses recant. Evidence gets lost in bureaucratic delays until statutes of limitation run out. So we do nothing? I didn't say that. Reeves pulled out his own phone. I'm saying we do this smart. We don't go through normal channels. We build an airtight case first, then release everything simultaneously. Criminal charges, media exposure, congressional investigation. Hit them from all sides so they can't suppress any single vector. How long does that take?
4 days, maybe 5. I need to bring in people I trust, verify the evidence chain, prepare charging documents. Reeves met her eyes. Can you stay alive that long? I've survived worse odds. That was before you threatened people with this much power. Reeves gestured to the tablet. Hale's dead. Walsh is dead. Strand's in custody, but that won't stop the others. They'll come at you hard. Let them come.
Reeves studied her for a long moment, then nodded.
All right. Send me encrypted copies of everything. I'll start building the case tonight. They split up, heading different directions out of the park. Rebecca walked between Torres and Marcus, hyper-aware of shadows and vehicles, every instinct screaming danger. They made it 3 blocks before the ambush. 2 cars pulled out from side streets, boxing them in. Doors opened. 4 men got out, professional, armed, moving with military precision.
Torres had her weapon drawn instantly. Federal agent, stand down. The men didn't stand down. They advanced. Rebecca's combat training kicked in. She assessed threats, calculated angles, looked for exits. They were outnumbered and outgunned in an empty street at midnight. Then headlights flooded the scene from behind them. A police cruiser pulled up fast, lights flashing. 2 officers got out, hands on weapons. Everyone freeze! The 4 men hesitated. Moment of uncertainty. Then one spoke into a radio, and they withdrew to their vehicles and drove away fast. The officers approached cautiously. You folks okay? The older one asked. We're fine, Torres said, showing her federal credentials. Those men were... We know who they were. The officer glanced at his partner. We got a call from a federal prosecutor named Reeves, said you might need backup. Rebecca felt tension drain from her shoulders. Reeves had anticipated this, had protection in place before they'd even left the park. The officers escorted them back to the safe house. Torres made a perimeter check while Marcus pulled security footage from nearby cameras, trying to identify the license plates on the ambush vehicles. Rebecca sat at the kitchen table and tried to process what had just happened. They'd come to kill her, not warn her, not threaten her, actually eliminate her, which meant she was close to something that terrified them. Her phone buzzed, text from Reeves. Footage from the park shows 2 of those men, military contractors, work for a private security firm called Aegis Solutions. Guess who sits on their board? Margaret Price. Rebecca showed Torres the text. They're escalating, Torres said. Next attempt will be more aggressive. Then we need to move faster. Rebecca pulled up the files again. What haven't we looked at yet? Marcus scrolled through folders. There's one marked contingency, encrypted separately from the rest. Open it. The contingency file contained a single video. Hale sitting in this very office recording himself. The timestamp showed 3 days before his arrest. If you're watching this, my insurance policy has been activated, Hale's recorded voice said. His face looked haggard, defeated. I want to make something clear about my death, if it comes to that. I am not suicidal. I have no intention of harming myself. If I die in custody, it's murder, and the people responsible are the ones I've named in the accompanying documents. He paused, collecting himself. There's one more piece of evidence I haven't disclosed. The final connection that proves everything. Senator Hartwell's chief of staff is a man named David Brenner. Yes, relation to Thomas Brennan, his nephew. David knew about his uncle's death, knew it was covered up, and he helped facilitate that cover-up in exchange for Hartwell's support in a future congressional run. Rebecca's breath caught. David Brenner has copies of every communication between Hartwell and the hospital. He kept them as insurance against Hartwell betraying him. Those copies are stored in a safe deposit box at First National Bank, downtown Chicago, box number 4721. The key is taped under the 3rd drawer of his desk in the Senate offices in D.C. Hale leaned closer to the camera. I know this seems elaborate, but these people are dangerous and they're connected. The only way to stop them is overwhelming evidence released simultaneously from multiple sources. Don't trust any single agency. Don't trust any single prosecutor. Trust the American people's reaction when they see what their elected officials have done. The video ended. Rebecca sat back, mind racing. They had everything now. The full conspiracy, documented and provable. But getting that safe deposit box meant going to D.C., breaking into a Senate office, stealing evidence. "We can't do this alone," she said. "No," Torres agreed. "We need help." Rebecca called Foster, explained everything. Hale's files, the ambush, the final video. Foster listened without interrupting. "You should have brought this to me immediately," Foster said when Rebecca finished. "Would you have believed me without verification?" Silence. Then, "Probably not. Too big, too connected." Foster exhaled slowly. "All right. You've done the groundwork. Now let me activate resources you don't have. I'm bringing in NCIS, the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, and congressional investigators. We're hitting all of them simultaneously." "What about David Brenner's safe deposit box?" "Leave that to professionals. I'm sending a team to D.C. tonight." "I want to be there when you arrest Hartwell." "Rebecca, I've earned this." Another pause. "Yes, you have." "All right, I'll arrange transport." The arrest operation launched 72 hours later. Coordinated raids across 3 states. FBI agents hitting Price's home in Michigan, U.S. Marshals taking Kellerman in Virginia, and Rebecca standing outside the Senate office building in D.C. as agents moved on Senator Hartwell. The senator was in a committee hearing when they came for him. Rebecca watched through windows as agents entered the chamber, spoke quietly to the chairman, then approached Hartwell's seat. Hartwell's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, rage, before settling on cold calculation. He stood, allowed himself to be handcuffed, and walked out with his head high. His eyes met Rebecca's as agents led him past. "You have no idea what you've done," he said quietly. "I know exactly what I've done. You've destroyed careers, ruined lives, damaged institutions that serve millions of people. I've held criminals accountable." Rebecca's voice was steady. "That's what justice looks like." Justice. Hartwell's laugh was bitter. "You're naive if you think this is about justice. This is about politics. And in 6 months, half these charges will be dismissed. The other half will plead down to nothing, and we'll all walk away with barely a scratch. Not this time." "We'll see." They took him away. Rebecca watched the car disappear, then turned to find Reeves standing nearby. "He's probably right about some of it," Reeves said. "The legal system favors the wealthy and connected, but we've got so much evidence that even expensive lawyers can't make it disappear." "What's the timeline?" "Arraignments start tomorrow. Media's already picking up the story. By tonight, this will be national news." Reeves smiled slightly. "You've brought down some powerful people, Sergeant. They won't forget that." "Neither will I." The story broke at 6 p.m. Eastern. Every major network led with it. Senator arrested. Former Surgeon General charged. Healthcare CEO indicted. All connected to a conspiracy spanning 2 decades, centered on a Chicago hospital where abuse had been policy. Rebecca's name was mentioned, her role in uncovering the corruption, the threats against her life. Footage of her being grabbed by Webb that first morning, Ethan's video finally released to the public. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media erupted. Hashtags trended. People who'd been mistreated at hospitals across the country started sharing their stories. And in a hotel room in D.C., Rebecca watched it all unfold and felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Relief. It was over. The investigation, the threats, the constant danger, the guilty were in custody. Evidence was public. There was no covering this up, no making it disappear. Her phone rang. Number she didn't recognize. "Ashford? This is Daniel Rourke, the guard who'd witnessed Brennan's death. I just wanted to say thank you for making sure Thomas didn't die for nothing. He didn't. His memory is going to help a lot of people." "I know. I saw the announcement about the memorial fund." Rourke's voice was rough with emotion. "His daughter called me. Said she finally feels like her father mattered to someone." He did matter. They all mattered. After Rourke hung up, Rebecca sat in silence, thought about all the people whose stories had led to this moment. Thomas Brennan, Patricia Wells, every patient and visitor who'd been dismissed and degraded. They'd mattered enough to bring down senators and CEOs. They'd mattered enough to change an entire institution. They'd mattered. 3 days later, Rebecca returned to Mercy General one final time. The hospital had new leadership, new policies, new culture. The lobby where Webb had grabbed her arm was different now, more welcoming, staff trained to treat everyone with dignity. Director Morrison met her at the entrance. "The board asked me to give you this," Morrison said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a check. Consulting fee for services rendered. More money than Rebecca usually made in 6 months. "I can't accept this," Rebecca said. "You can, and you will. You've earned it." Morrison smiled. "We're also naming the new Patient Advocacy Center after you, the Ashford Center for Healthcare Justice. It'll provide free legal services to people who've been mistreated by medical institutions." Rebecca didn't know what to say. "You changed this place," Morrison continued. "Not just policies and procedures, but the fundamental understanding that everyone who walks through those doors deserves respect. That's worth honoring." They shook hands, and Rebecca left the hospital for the last time. Outside, Torres was waiting by a car. "Ready to go home?" Torres asked. "Yeah, I think I am." They drove through Chicago streets, past the federal building where so many depositions had happened, past the park where they'd met Reeves, past all the places that had been part of this journey. Rebecca's phone buzzed one more time. Text from an unknown number. "The trial starts in 3 months. Hope you're ready to testify. Because we're going to destroy your credibility, expose every mistake you've ever made, and make sure the jury sees you as an obsessed vigilante who destroyed innocent lives. See you in court." Rebecca read the text twice, then deleted it. Let them try. She had truth on her side, evidence in hand, and the courage to face whatever came next. She'd walked into Mercy General alone and dismissed. She was leaving with justice served and vindication earned, and whatever battles remained, she'd face them the same way she'd faced everything else, with quiet determination and the absolute certainty that some things were worth fighting for. The car merged onto the highway heading toward the airport, and Rebecca finally allowed herself to close her eyes and rest. The rest lasted exactly 40 minutes. Then Rebecca's phone rang again, and the number displayed made her sit up straight. "Mitchell Reeves." "We have a problem," he said without preamble. David Brenner's safe deposit box was emptied 3 hours ago. Rebecca's exhaustion vanished. How is that possible? The bank should have been under surveillance. It was. But Brenner had a cosigner on the box we didn't know about. Woman named Jennifer Castellano, listed as his fiancée. She walked in with proper ID and authorization, cleaned out the box, and disappeared before our team could intercept. Where is she now? Unknown. But here's where it gets worse. Castellano works for Hartwell's campaign, senior communications director. She's been with him for 6 years. Rebecca felt cold certainty settle over her. She's destroying evidence. Probably already destroyed. We've got agents looking for her. But without those documents, our case against Hartwell specifically gets weaker. We can still nail him on the financial stuff, but the direct connection to Brennan's cover-up dies with those papers. What about the video? Hale's testimony? Hearsay without corroborating evidence. Defense will claim Hale was lying to save himself, that he fabricated the connection to David Brenner. Reeves sounded exhausted. We're not losing the whole case, but we're losing the most damning piece. Rebecca's mind raced. Brenner kept those documents as insurance against Hartwell, which means Hartwell knew they existed and has been trying to get them back. If Castellano is destroying evidence on his orders, that's obstruction of justice, another charge, but we have to prove he ordered it. Then we make Castellano talk. Can't make her talk if we can't find her. Rebecca ended the call and sat thinking. Torres had pulled the car over, listening to the conversation. "What do you want to do?" Torres asked. "Keep driving. I need to think." They continued toward the airport in silence. Rebecca turned the problem over in her mind. Castellano had a head start, resources, and Hartwell's network backing her. But she also had to know that destroying evidence made her complicit. That changed her from witness to co-conspirator. People in that position usually made mistakes. Rebecca's phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. "Found something." Castellano's phone pinged a cell tower near O'Hare 30 minutes ago. She's running. Rebecca showed Torres. "Can you get us there faster?" Torres hit the accelerator. They reached O'Hare in 23 minutes, Torres flashing federal credentials to bypass traffic. Inside the terminal, Rebecca scanned crowds while Torres coordinated with airport security. "International terminal," Torres said, reading updates on her phone. She bought a ticket to Sao Paulo. Flight boards in 40 minutes. They ran. The international terminal was packed with travelers. Rebecca pushed through crowds, eyes scanning for a woman matching Castellano's description. Late 30s, dark hair, professional clothes. There. Near gate E7, a woman in a charcoal suit jacket, pulling a carry-on, checking her phone obsessively. Rebecca approached from the side, Torres flanking from the other direction. Jennifer Castellano? The woman's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide, calculating escape routes. Don't run, Rebecca said quietly. There's nowhere to go. Castellano's hand moved toward her bag. Torres was there instantly, weapon appearing. Federal agent. Hands where I can see them. Castellano froze. Her face crumpled, all the professional composure evaporating.
I didn't want to do this, she said, voice breaking. He said it was just campaign damage control, that the documents were private correspondence, nothing illegal. Who said that? Rebecca asked. Richard. Castellano's eyes were filling with tears. Senator Hartwell. He called me this morning, said David's box needed to be emptied before federal agents got to it. Said David was family and we protected family. Where are the documents now?
I burned them. In my apartment 2 hours ago. All of them. Castellano was shaking. He said I was helping, that I was being loyal. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what was actually in them until I started reading. Rebecca felt disappointment settle heavy in her chest. Evidence destroyed. The direct link to Hartwell's knowledge of the cover-up, gone. But Castellano was still talking. I took pictures first, she said quietly, of everything before I burned them. I wasn't sure why, just instinct, I guess. They're on my phone. Torres and Rebecca exchanged glances. Show me, Rebecca said. Castellano pulled out her phone with trembling hands, opened the photo gallery. Hundreds of images, scanned documents, emails, handwritten notes, all time-stamped from that morning. Evidence of Hartwell personally ordering the cover-up of his chief of staff's uncle's death. Emails where he discussed paying off witnesses, notes detailing how to suppress media coverage, everything they needed, preserved digitally moments before the physical copies burned. I'm going to need that phone, Torres said. Castellano handed it over without resistance. Am I under arrest? That depends. Rebecca studied her. Did Hartwell order you to destroy evidence, or did he ask you to secure it? He said secure, but he meant destroy. I'm not stupid. Castellano's laugh was bitter. I just wanted to believe I was working for someone decent, someone who cared about more than power. You have a choice now, Rebecca said. Cooperate fully, testify against Hartwell, admit you destroyed evidence on his orders, or take the fall alone while he walks away. Castellano looked at the boarding gate, at the plane that would take her to Brazil, and a life spent looking over her shoulder. Then she looked back at Rebecca. I'll testify, she said, about all of it. They took Castellano to the federal building, where Reeves was waiting with 2 other prosecutors and a stenographer. Her statement took 3 hours. She detailed every conversation with Hartwell, every instruction he'd given, every time he'd asked her to do something that felt wrong but she'd rationalized as loyalty. And she handed over the photos from her phone, complete documentation of David Brenner's insurance policy. Reeves reviewed the images, his expression growing darker with each one. This is it, he said finally. This puts Hartwell directly in the conspiracy, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, destruction of evidence. He looked at Castellano. You just handed us a senator. Good, Castellano said hollowly. He deserves it. The amended charges against Hartwell were filed that evening. News broke at midnight. New evidence showing the senator had personally ordered destruction of documents linking him to a cover-up of negligent homicide. The media firestorm intensified. Calls for resignation, ethics investigations, fellow senators distancing themselves from him. And through it all, Rebecca watched from her hotel room, feeling something settle that had been restless inside her for weeks. They had won, completely, undeniably. The trial began 6 weeks later. Federal courthouse in Chicago, packed courtroom, cameras outside. Rebecca sat in the gallery and watched justice unfold in real time. Prosecution called witness after witness. Patricia Wells testified about the kickback scheme. Daniel Rourke described Thomas Brennan's death and the cover-up that followed. Jennifer Castellano detailed Hartwell's instructions to destroy evidence. and Rebecca took the stand on day 4. Hartwell's attorney, a new one, expensive, with a reputation for destroying witnesses, approached her with calculated aggression. "Ms. Ashford, isn't it true that you've been obsessed with this case? That you've made it your personal mission to destroy Senator Hartwell, regardless of actual guilt?" "No. You've pursued this investigation for nearly 2 months now, correct?" "I've pursued justice for 2 months. There's a difference." "Justice or revenge?" The attorney smiled coldly. "You were physically removed from Mercy General Hospital by security. That must have been humiliating." "It was instructive." "Instructive how?" "It showed me how institutions treat people they consider beneath them, how power gets abused when nobody's watching." Rebecca kept her voice level. "And it showed me that sometimes the only way to fix broken systems is to expose them completely. Even if that means destroying careers, ruining lives." "I didn't destroy careers. Criminal behavior destroyed careers. I just documented it." The attorney tried different angles, suggested Rebecca had fabricated evidence, implied she had personal grudges, accused her of manipulating witnesses. Rebecca answered every question with calm precision, never losing composure, never taking the bait. And when the prosecution got their turn on redirect, they played the video. Ethan's recording from that first morning, showing Webb grabbing Rebecca's arm, forcing her toward the doors while she stayed calm and asked for verification. The jury watched in silence. "Ms. Ashford," the prosecutor asked, "why didn't you fight back when Captain Webb put his hands on you?" "Because fighting would have proven his assumptions right, that I was a threat, that I didn't belong. I stayed calm because I knew the truth would come out eventually." Rebecca looked at the jury. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to become what people accuse you of being. The defense attorney had no further questions. Hartwell's testimony was a disaster. He was arrogant, dismissive, contemptuous of questions he considered beneath him. He denied everything, blamed everyone else, and made it clear he thought the entire proceeding was political theater. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted, press scrambling for phones, Hartwell's face going white with shock, his attorneys immediately filing for appeal. But the verdict stood. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Hartwell got 18 years federal prison. Margaret Price got 15. James Kellerman got 12. Victoria Strand got 20, her sentence enhanced because of the attempted murder conspiracy. Marcus Webb, tried separately for manslaughter in Thomas Brennan's death, got 25 years. Leonard Watts got 10 years for his role in the cover-up. Malcolm Brenner, the former chief of staff who'd authorized the hush money, got 8 years. And David Brenner, the chief of staff who'd helped cover up his own uncle's death for political advantage, got 12 years plus permanent ban from government service. Rebecca watched each sentencing from the gallery, watched powerful people led away in handcuffs, watched the system actually work the way it was supposed to. Foster found her after Hartwell's sentencing. "You did it," Foster said simply. "We did it," Rebecca corrected. "This was never just me. Maybe not. But you're the one who refused to walk away when it would have been easier. The one who kept pushing when everyone else was ready to accept half measures." Foster handed her an envelope. "This is from the Secretary of the Navy, official commendation for service above and beyond. There's also a job offer inside if you want it. Consulting position, traveling to military hospitals nationwide, fixing broken cultures before they turn into another Mercy General." Rebecca opened the envelope. "Read the offer. Good pay, full benefits, meaningful work." "Can I think about it?" "Take all the time you need." Rebecca left the courthouse and walked through Chicago streets, no destination in mind, just walking, processing, letting everything settle. Her phone rang. Angela Torres, the nurse whose cousin had been harassed by Webb. "I wanted to thank you," Angela said. "My cousin came to visit me at work yesterday, walked right through the main entrance, and nobody stopped him. Nobody questioned him. He actually cried because it felt so different. I'm glad." "Are you okay? You sound tired." "I am tired, but I'm okay." Rebecca found herself smiling. "Actually, I'm better than okay." She walked to Lincoln Park, to the bench where she'd met Reeves, sat down and watched the pond, thinking about everything that had happened. 3 months ago, she'd been a consultant doing routine work, keeping her head down, staying out of trouble. Then Marcus Webb had grabbed her arm and made a choice that changed everything, and she'd made a choice too. To fight back. To pursue justice even when it was dangerous. To refuse to be silenced or intimidated. That choice had cost her sleep, safety, and peace of mind, but it had also given her something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Purpose. Her phone buzzed. Text from Ethan Cole. The Thomas Brennan Memorial Fund just hit its first million in donations. We're going to help a lot of people. Thank you for making this possible. Another text, this one from Daniel Rourke. Started a new job, hospital security, different facility. Using everything I learned to make sure what happened at Mercy never happens here. You inspired that. And one from Linda Vasquez, the head nurse. Culture's really changing here. People speak up now, stand up for patients. It feels like a different place. You did that. Rebecca read them all and felt something unlock in her chest. This was why it mattered, not the arrests or the headlines or the vindication, but the ripples spreading outward, the people empowered to speak up, the systems forced to change, the lives saved because someone finally said enough. She pulled out her phone and called Foster. I'll take the job, Rebecca said when Foster answered, but I have conditions. Name them. I work independently, report directly to you, nobody else. And if I find corruption, I pursue it to the end, no matter who it exposes. Done. When can you start? Give me 2 weeks. I need to rest first. She hung up and sat watching the pond for a long time. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and orange. People walked past, couples holding hands, parents with children, individuals lost in their own thoughts. All of them protected by systems that worked because people fought to make them work. Rebecca stood and started walking back toward her hotel. Tomorrow she'd fly home, sleep in her own bed, see friends she'd neglected for months, take time to recover from the battle she'd just fought. But soon she'd be back in the fight. Different hospital, different city, same mission. Because there were more Marcus Webbs out there, more Leonard Watts, more Malcolm Brenners, people who abused power because they thought nobody would stop them. And Rebecca had learned something crucial in the past 3 months. She could stop them. Not because she was special or superhuman, but because she was willing to do the work. To gather evidence, to speak truth, to stand up when others stayed silent. That was enough. That would always be enough. Her phone rang one more time. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Rebecca Ashford? Speaking. My name is Dr. Sarah Kim. I'm a resident at Westside Memorial Hospital in Detroit. I saw your testimony on the news, saw what you did at Mercy General. A pause. I think we have a similar problem here. Security director who targets patients based on how they look. Administration that ignores complaints. I tried reporting it through proper channels, and I got written up for insubordination. Rebecca stopped walking. Tell me what's happening. Dr. Kim talked for 15 minutes, described a pattern of abuse eerily similar to what had happened at Mercy General. Patients turned away, visitors harassed, complaints buried, and nobody willing to fight back because the cost seemed too high. I don't know if you can help, Dr. Kim said finally, but I had to try. Because what you did, proving that one person can make a difference, that justice is possible, that gave me hope. Rebecca looked up at the Chicago skyline, at the lights coming on as darkness fell. Send me everything you have, she said. Documentation, witness names, specific incidents. I'll review it and get back to you. Really? You'll help? That's what I do now. After Dr. Kim hung up, Rebecca stood on the sidewalk and let herself feel the weight of it. Another fight, another institution to take on, more powerful people who'd resist and retaliate, but also more people to protect. More Thomas Brennans who deserved justice. More Angela Torreses who deserved to walk through hospital doors without being judged. She thought about that first morning, standing in Mercy General's lobby while Marcus Webb sneered at her coat and her folder and decided she didn't belong. He'd been wrong. She'd belonged exactly there, exactly when she was needed, doing exactly what nobody else was willing to do. And now she belonged in Detroit. And after that, wherever the next Dr. Kim called from, wherever systems failed and people suffered and somebody needed to stand up and say, this isn't acceptable, this ends now. Rebecca started walking again, and this time she knew where she was going. Home first, rest, recovery, then back to work. Because institutions didn't change themselves. Systems didn't fix their own corruption. Power didn't voluntarily surrender its abuses. Change required people willing to fight for it. People who understood that silence had costs measured in lives destroyed and justice denied. People like her. She wasn't special, wasn't extraordinary. She was just someone who'd learned that being dismissed and underestimated could become a weapon if you refused to accept it as truth. The quiet woman in the worn coat had walked into a hospital and torn down an empire, and she was just getting started. Because every institution that protected abusers, every system that valued profit over people, every powerful person who thought they were untouchable, they all had the same vulnerability. They all depended on good people staying silent, and Rebecca Ashford had learned she had a voice that carried. She planned to use it. Sometimes the most dangerous person in any room isn't the one shouting or threatening. It's the quiet one taking notes, gathering evidence, and refusing to accept that cruelty is normal or that power is permanent. Justice doesn't require perfection. It requires persistence. And sometimes one person refusing to back down is enough to bring down an empire built on looking the other way.